Welcome to On the Issues. I'm Councilman Jim Waring, and joining me on today's show is Phoenix Parks and Recreation Director Erickson. Welcome to the show. Really appreciate you coming on.
It's great to be here. Thank you.
You have a big responsibility. A lot of kids and Phoenix residents count on you every day, even if they don't know it. Can you explain a little bit about what your department does and your responsibilities?
Sure. The Phoenix Parks and Recreation Department is comprised of a vast array of different kinds of programs and activities. We have the mountain parks, which are very popular in our community. We have swimming pools, golf courses, community centers where people can come and have public meetings, or they can play basketball and be part of youth leagues. We have museums. The Pueblo Grande Museum is part of our jurisdiction as well. And so there's lots of different things where people can come and do the kinds of activities that they want to do, either in an organized situation or even by themselves if they just want to be out hiking or running in a park or walking in a park.
So what's the budget that you oversee?
The budget for the Parks and Recreation Department is about $106 million.
Yeah, that's a big chunk of the city budget. And how many employees do you have?
Over 1,200. And seasonally it gets a little bit bigger because we have lifeguards, and so we have 29 pools, and so we add about 500 lifeguards every summer. Yeah,
every year I think you have to come and say, hey, we're going to hire all these folks. So, and we really appreciate all the efforts. I think we have some great facilities. Obviously, we hope to add more in the coming years. Do you want to talk a little bit? One of the things that we've talked about a lot with constituents, at least in my area, is, for example, if you want a new soccer field, can you talk about like how that could be funded, how much it costs, how do those kind of decisions get made? Absolutely.
So we have a Parks Preserve Initiative fund that was voted on by the voters, 83% approval rate, and it's 1/10 of 1% of a sales tax, and that money goes into 60% for flatland parks, which would be your traditional parks that have things like soccer fields or swimming pools or playgrounds, things of that nature. And 40% of it goes to the mountain parks and the preserves where people go hiking and have interpretive opportunities to see wide open spaces. And so that's kind of how it's funded. A soccer field, for example, is very popular up in your council district. And it would, to build a brand new soccer field would cost about $1 million. And so we're hoping in the coming year to add 2 soccer fields up in the Reach 11 area, which is Desert Ridge, right there off of Black Mountain Boulevard.
You have a lot of kids up there, obviously a lot of leagues and so forth. But so it's $1 million, but then you also have to pay for the upkeep as well. So how much does that cost on an annual basis?
So a soccer field to maintain on an annual basis, just one by itself, would probably be about $20,000 to $30,000, including things like the water, the electricity if you have lights, and also the fertilization and the irrigation systems related to that particular facility. Plus you have to have somebody come and mow it, right? And it needs to be mowed and maintained at a level so that people don't, twist ankles, things of that nature. So you have to really be, the sports fields are really a higher level care for us.
Anybody who's still got a yard, you got to get out and mow it, you got to weed it, you got to do all this stuff to it. And it's time intensive, and it takes some effort. You mentioned Reach 11, so maybe we'll segue to that for just a second. That's also part of your responsibility. Can you explain a little bit about what Reach 11 is, where it is, what we use it for?
Sure. So Reach 11, many people don't know, expands all the way from Cave Creek Road all the way down to Scottsdale Road, and is a swath of land that the Bureau of Reclamation has let us use as a facility for recreation. We have on that particular property that's developed already towards the Cave Creek area, or the Cave Creek Road area, soccer fields, and it's a nationally recognized soccer field complex. We have 18 fields, 17 of them are natural turf. One is synthetic turf, and so when the weather's bad, we can still play on that one, providing it's still, not lightning.
People come from all over the country to play on those fields.
So the busiest weeks that we have between 400 and 500 teams that come to play for tournaments at that particular facility. And then as you proceed down towards the east, we have a 4-field baseball youth complex. 2 of the fields are available for people with mobility issues, things of that nature. So if somebody's in a wheelchair, it's a resin surface, so kids can play on that. And we also have 2 natural turf fields there. Those were generously donated to us and built by the Diamondbacks with APS and the various sponsors that they have to their Field of Dreams program. And then as you proceed closer to Tatum, At Tatum Road, we have the Reach 11 horse arena. And so we have a nonprofit group that's running that for us. And they're going to be putting some improvements into that coming up. It's called Horse Lovers Park. And Horse Lovers Park has some arenas, some trails where they can ride horses. But that's going to get some improvements in the next 2 to 3 years, not on the dime of the taxpayers, but in our partnership with the group that's running that facility. And then the whole area that goes up to Scottsdale Road, there's opportunities for people to do hiking and biking, see the natural habitat that's out there. Oftentimes we see birds and sometimes coyotes that are in that whole area. And again, it's great partnership with the Bureau of Reclamation.
We have we are very blessed in District 2, because the area you're talking about, you've got the MIM, you've got Mayo Clinic, you've got the Desert Ridge Mall, plus the folks who live there. I mean, it's really a great growth area. But the amenities that sometimes are more prevalent, downtown, are making their way up slowly but surely towards our area. New soccer fields and so forth, much needed in a very heavily residential area. So we're excited about that. Obviously, as you said, it's kind of pricey. And there's another item that we're talking about up there. We've had several, because there was a lot of demand coming out of the downturn. People wanted new stuff, and so dog parks. You want to talk a little bit about dog parks? We've got some new facilities. You and I have spent quite a bit of time on that, as did your predecessor. They're heavily used facilities.
Absolutely. One that we have in existence now is at Paradise Valley Park, and that dog park.
And it's pretty new.
It's pretty new within the last couple of years. Absolutely. Yeah. And that one is very, very popular. But we're getting ready. Construction drawings are done in the spring. We are hoping that if the construction schedule can stay on, we should start the one at Desert Ridge area, which is going to be right off of the Black Mountain and the 101, right as you come off.
The new off-ramp.
Right as you come off the new off-ramp. It's going to be right there to the west. And that's the area also that the future 2 soccer fields will be in. But the dog park should be available in the spring or early summer. Yeah,
the citizens had a lot of input in designing that dog park, so hopefully people are excited about that. Also, as you mentioned, the Paradise Valley one, that was an existing park. So we have a pretty big, I don't know what the footprint is in acreage for that community center and park, but it's a pretty big footprint, and so there was space available. So it's a nice dog park, but it was also cost effective. Aren't they usually about $500,000 or so, or even more?
So depending on the amenities you have to put in, obviously the one that we're going to put in at Desert Ridge is going to be a little bit more, because we're going to have to put a parking lot. We're going to have to also have water and sewer taken to that location. But we're building one right now over at a different park, at Deer Valley Park, and that one was about $800,000 for the 3 pins, and it's about 3 acres in size.
And I think the Paradise Valley one was maybe only $250, because you already had the water and everything put in. So that was a pretty cost effective for a facility that lots of people use.
Indeed, we used an existing piece of the park and put fence,
that really was
water
kind
line.
of underused.
Absolutely,
yeah.
It was an underutilized area.
Yeah. So it's kind of exciting stuff coming not just to District 2, but to the city. You mentioned the preserve areas for anybody, and I do think they're hidden gems. It's hard to say that when you're talking about the acreage that we're talking about, but the trails and so forth are just absolutely spectacular if you go up. You want to talk about kind of where they are and how they get funded? Sure.
So we have 3 areas that really have the biggest amount of preserves. We have South Mountain, which is the granddaddy of them all, the beginning. And then in the center part of town, we have the Phoenix Mountain Preserves. But the newest stuff is up in the north part of town, and that's a Sonoran Preserve. And so we have 3 trailheads up there: Desert Vista, Desert Hills, and Apache Wash.
I've been to 2 of the grand openings, and they are really, really incredible.
Absolutely. Apache Wash, believe it or not, this last September, in the month of September, was our heaviest used facility in the preserves. And so throughout the whole system, we have 40 trailheads, we have 200 miles of trails, and just really a great amenity to go and almost feel like you're lost. Not in the city anymore, you're out in the middle of somewhere maybe far away.
I always say, if a Terminator was coming back from time, showing my 1980s love of movies, if a Terminator was coming back, and you want to drop off the grid, just turn off your cell phone. You could still be within hailing distance of 4 million people, and nobody would find you. It feels like you're out in just the most beautiful middle of nowhere, and it's just a wonderful experience for those who haven't availed themselves of that privilege. I do sort of jokingly, because I can remember one specific constituent in Tatum Ranch who just was bemoaning the fact that there was nowhere for him to ride his bike. He was really upset about that. You're smiling, because I'm like, well, you know, right over there, we got beautiful miles of trail. I mean, you couldn't ask for a better setting, certainly not in any kind of urban area, really, that I can think of, where you have peace and quiet and so forth. I just, you know, so I wanted to take advantage and make sure that people knew that that was up there and places for them to go. I think you can take horses too, can't you?
You can take horses. Yeah. The only places you can't take horses basically are going to be to our 3 peaks, so Payastoa Peak, Echo Canyon, and the Cholla Trail. The other thing that we want to always emphasize when we're talking about trails is safety. And we do have a campaign that is take a hike, do it right. And we always encourage people, if
take your water.
Absolutely. And if you're halfway through your water, you should turn around and go back.
If it's 70 degrees, take your water.
Absolutely.
And people don't do it, and we have to do rescues. It seems like, and I get the updates on my phone, it seems like almost on a daily basis. I'm sure it's not that much, but it's a shocking number of people that have to be rescued.
And people don't sometimes know their own ability, and so
we have from out of town, they're not used to the heat. Yeah.
And we have trails for all abilities. We have trails that are for beginners. We have trails that are for experts. And we have everything in between. And so we encourage people to look at how the trail is rated. All those are noted on our website, but they're also noted at the trailheads. We have great signage that remind people, you know, that you need to hydrate not just when you get there, but also before you go.
Yeah. Now, you mentioned South Mountain. I think I've read, but I don't know that I've ever seen any kind of official report. Is that actually the biggest city-owned park in the country or the world? I've heard different things and maybe overstated.
So we were, up until recently, the largest municipal park in the United States. And because McDowell Mountain has added a few more acres, it's Scottsdale. But as far as landmass that's not contiguous, we still have 40,000 acres of mountain parks and preserves in the city of Phoenix.
Yeah, well, it's a testament to our city elders. You know, as you mentioned, we've got 3 large areas spread throughout the city, available to residents, if not 24/7, you know, on a daily basis. You know, I've certainly gone to eat all 3 and hiked, and I'm not a huge hiker, but I certainly have been out there with my loved ones and friends and have enjoyed it thoroughly. But I had heard that about South Mountain, I think maybe before I was on the council, that was the biggest, and it sounds like that was correct until just recently. So. And
it still is 16,000 acres by itself. Standing alone, it's 16,000 acres in a contiguous situation, and the rest of the city gets the balance of that.
Sure. One thing that's been in the paper, I've sat on some subcommittees and have talked about it, so maybe you can just tell residents sort of where the project or proposed project is at, is the Margaret Hance Park. So can you talk a little bit about, you know, what's going on there?
Absolutely. That is, I think, a really important park in the downtown area. Obviously, it is the area that spans across the tunnel. And that particular facility, we've gone through a master plan process with that over the last 3 years. We've done a recent economic impact study on what the impact of that park will mean for the community. And so we're getting ready to roll out the next phase, which will be the design. And so now that we know what everybody wants in the park, we'll be able to get the designers to start designing it, getting public input, and really making that a thriving area in the downtown area. Lots of residents are moving to downtown Phoenix. It's going to double in the next several months, and it's doubled even since probably 2 or 3 years ago. And so there's lots of people needing a place to go and sit and enjoy open space, have a respite from concrete and heat. And so the green grass areas that we have and the availability to have big concerts. We had the Final Four music festival there, and it was a great opportunity. We saw 15 to 20,000 people a day in that park for that event. And so it's a real good gathering spot for the community, not just
it's a big park.
Absolutely.
It's not a small park. It's
33
a big
acres,
yeah.
And it's not just for the people who live in downtown. There's lots of large events and festivals and activities that happen in that park that draw from
I think
all
the Martin
over.
Luther King Day events are always held there.
Absolutely. The McDowell Mountain Music Festival The Irish Cultural Center is there. We also have the Japanese Friendship Garden, the Phoenix Center for the Arts, which has done a great deal for our community as far as the arts programs. And so there's lots of cultural facilities in and around that park that will benefit from it being an improved space. It's a great space now, but it will be even better when we go through the planning. And we do have partners who are working with us, the Hance Park Conservancy, who are going to help us raise funds to make it a public-private partnership so that it's not just public money, there's going to be private money going into it as well.
Now shifting small gears I like to play tennis, and so to my surprise, very shortly after I got elected on the council, I had friends, I don't get to play much, and they were from out of town but in Arizona, and they wanted me to go play at the Phoenix Tennis Center. I didn't even know what that was. So could you talk about the refurbishment? It's a beautiful facility if you do like tennis. It's not that close to District 2, unfortunately, but people come from all over to play tournaments. I mean, if you want to go play there, is it open to the public? How do you know? Is there a schedule posted somewhere?
Sure. So that particular facility we just renovated a couple years ago. The 20 plus courts that are there now all are brand new lights. And you can use it. There is an operator that's operating that for us, and just make a reservation with them. It is in Washington Park, which is right there on 23rd Avenue and Citrus Way.
It's kind of hidden away. That's part of the reason I mentioned specifically where is it, because you could drive right by it and not necessarily recognize
So it's right by Washington High School. It's just to the south of Washington High School. And again, it's a great opportunity for people to play with their friends, get involved in leagues. We have some junior tennis that is going on there as well. And so we redid the courts a couple years ago, and this year we're going to do the clubhouse. And the clubhouse is back from the 1960s. We're going to refurbish that and then also make a new nice entry area. And again, that's funded with the Parks Preserve Initiative funds that we had mentioned earlier in the show.
Which voters voted for?
Which voters approved 83%. And again, it's really the backbone of how we're able to keep facilities and our playgrounds and the various things that we need to add to keep our community interested in going to parks up to date.
Now, one of your favorite topics with me, I'm sure, is the golf courses. So we own several golf courses around the city. They had not been doing well financially, and now they're doing better. Can you just kind of talk about what changes were made, where the courses are, and how people can get access to those?
Sure. We do have 6 courses that the city owns. 2 of them are operated by various universities. We have one that's Grand Canyon University, and the other one, Papago, is ASU.
And they're still open to the public?
And they're still open to the public, and they get the same public rates. They're not outrageously expensive. We have Cave Creek up there in the north part of town, Palo Verde that's in central, Encanto Park that's in central, and then Aguila, which is in the south part of town. So there's various courses spread around the city, and so gives everybody an opportunity to have something accessible to them. The reason we were able to kind of bridge the gap in the shortfall of funds, we outsourced the maintenance, and so the maintenance is outsourced at all the courses.
It used to be done in-house, and that wasn't going particularly well. So.
Yeah, and it was an expense that kept rising and rising. But the 2 that we outsourced to the universities, that helped as well, because that took that completely off of the city rolls and the books, even though we still own the property. And so it made it more cost effective. We also have done some improvements to kind of manage the times and make sure that we're not overstaffed. And so the clubhouses, we actually still run as far as the city. And that's something that we're looking at. It doesn't make sense to continue to do that. And right now, the only thing we've outsourced is the maintenance portion of it.
So which one is the most popular course?
You know what? Believe it or not, Encanto's a real popular one. It has a short 9, so they've got a 9-hole course as well as the 18. And I think because it's just, rooted in history and really a historic part of our city.
It's interesting stuff. So what can we expect going forward? We've got, I guess maybe I should mention first the Parks Board. Can you explain the relationship? Because it can be a little odd sometimes. People expect maybe the council people to necessarily be voting on dog parks and so forth, but that's not always the way it works out. Can you explain that conundrum?
Sure. So the charter authority for the Parks Board is that they have authority over almost everything with the exception of fees related to golf, tennis, and swimming. And so any kind of fee increases for admission or things of that nature are actually governed by the City Council. Intergovernmental agreements, those are also governed by the council. But things where they're operating agreements, things of that nature that would be for, say, Horse Lovers Park that we talked about earlier, or if we had someone running one of our facilities, those things would go through the Parks and Recreation Board.
And so those are appointed volunteers from around the city. So we had an interesting issue with the off-lease issue, which I'm sure you remember from a couple of years ago. I guess other cities have experimented. I can't remember exactly which cities, but I think there had been some things about where you could take your dog to a park and maybe for certain hours they'd be off-leash, so forth. Obviously, we don't want to ticket people, but at the same time, you know, your dog can't accost other people, and it's tricky. So that was a Parks Board decision. That was not something that came to the City Council. You want to explain? And you know, I had to explain that to citizens, and that they had to go then, I guess, lobby or petition the Parks Board.
Sure, that is a correct statement. So basically, the experiment that we tried for the off-leash dog area, we really didn't get Parks Board approval behind that because they were concerned about children, and if you don't have a controlled area. And I think that's why the dog parks have become very popular. We do have currently 10 dog parks, and with the adding of the additional 2 that we talked about previously, we'll be up to 12 dog parks. And so really we want people to go to areas where the dogs are in a fenced-in area. It doesn't always, people don't always control their dogs when they're off-leash and just not controlled by a fence, and they can get away from them pretty quickly. And it's not only for the safety of the people who might not be the dog owner themselves, but also for safety of the dogs. We've had issues where dogs have run out into the middle of the road, and you know, sometimes something sets them off that maybe isn't expected. And so, you know, we really want the dogs and the participants that come to the park to be safe. You know, it's not only a park rule, but it's a law that people have to have their dogs on leash.
And I forget, I've seen statistics about how many Americans, I don't know, I've seen it for just Phoenix, but how many Americans own a dog, and it's an enormous number. I want to say that there were 80 million dogs in the United States. We've got a population of 308 million, so if you household it down, it means like 1 out of every 2, look to the left, look to the right, you know, one of you has a dog at the very least.
Well,
so
even in the downtown area, it's
we have
amazing.
To address.
Absolutely. Yeah. Even in the downtown area, at Hance Park, we do have a dog park, and that is one of a very most popular dog parks that we have. And you know, people go there every day from the apartment complexes they have because they don't have yards. And so, you know, people want to have that companionship, and sometimes it's comfort.
I was not a dog owner when we first had this issue, but in the last year we become a dog owner, or I've become a dog owner, and we do have a yard, but I have been to the dog parks, and it is amazing pretty much anytime you go. I mean, it's pretty crowded, and then I happened to catch that statistic that I just referenced, which I think is accurate. It sort of explained it. You know, I go out and knock on doors, people have dogs, so if it seems like we're dwelling on that, it is an issue that has to be addressed, because if you don't give people a place to go, havoc can ensue. So, but we're excited about the different amenities. You know, going forward around the city, obviously there are budget constraints of all stripes. Can we expect to see more dog parks, more projects around town? Is that something going forward that are we going to scale anything back because of budget constraints?
Well, I think what you'll see from at least the Parks and Recreation Department related to improvements will probably improve existing parks. It's really difficult to add new parks, and we do have some land that we just haven't been able to develop yet, but it's hard to develop the land, then you don't have the maintenance to go on and on and on forever and annually.
You have to be forward thinking.
Absolutely.
Because we've had some things with the city, the green street signs that are deteriorating rapidly. That was one where there was never a budget for maintaining them particularly, and so that wasn't your problem, but it just calls to mind, remind yourself if you're going to build something, you got to figure out how you're going to keep it going long term.
Absolutely. We have to be thoughtful to make sure that we can maintain quality and that people have access to things that are safe, and that's the other part of it, right? And so improved playgrounds, walking paths. Walking paths are the most popular thing in parks across the United States. People just want to know how far, with the Fitbit craze and those types of things. Our Fit Phoenix program really is trying to encourage people to go out and do things that keep them healthy and fit You know, it helps with a lot of things, making people happier, but also with our health concerns that we have. You know, health costs are so expensive. If we can get people to be just a little bit healthier, it might make some of those costs go down.
Like, how much is playground equipment? That's a question I get asked fairly frequently. You know, I have young kids, so we use the playgrounds. So the apparatuses that you see at parks, they're usually pretty big. They look, some of them are more complicated than others. How much does something like that cost?
Generally between about $150,000 to $200,000, depending on how much. If you were going to put shade over it,
which you
those
kind of
types
have
of things.
to have here. I mean, at some
Absolutely.
level.
And if you don't have shade, you have trees that can help. But you know, trees, when you plant trees, it takes a little while for them to mature, and trees are really important to our park system as well. We're trying as a city to get to a canopy cover of 25%.
We were just talking about that yesterday.
Absolutely, and in the parks, anytime we make an improvement to a park, we make sure that we put that as part of our formula for having not only trees, but maybe straight shade structures, things of that nature, to make sure it's covered, because people don't want to be in a park if they're hot.
Well, and they also like to use the restroom.
Absolutely.
And I know that's a comment. You know, for ours, which is my district, I represent, which is a newer area, you know, some of the parks weren't completely fleshed out, the downturn happened and so forth, so we get questions about, well, can we get a bathroom in a park? Obviously, if you have little kids, you need the facilities. That's usually about $250,000.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I think people don't totally appreciate how expensive stuff like that is if you don't already have the infrastructure. So is there a special budget for things like that, or that's all competing, you know, soccer fields and paths and bathrooms, it all kind of comes out of the same pot?
It all comes out of the Parks Preserve Initiative funds, and again, that's why it's such an important fund that we have. You know, that it goes until the year 2038, and so it's something that was very important to make sure that our community remains vital.
Yeah, well, what you do is vitally important. You and I have spent a lot of time meeting with constituents, both at City Hall and out in my district, and I really appreciate that. I think you've done a great job, and your predecessor, Jim Burke, before. I think both of you have really spent a lot of time kind of walking people through these issues. We hear a lot from HOAs, soccer groups. I know we've heard from several of those, just about kind of how this works and so forth. And I think we've made some good progress because, as you said, putting in soccer fields, you know, putting in some other parks. You and I have spent quite a bit of time talking about those kind of things in the last couple of years, which I really think that makes the city more livable. I do think that's one of the core functions of city government, has been going back 150 years or so. So really appreciate all your efforts. Looking forward to working with you, and if people have any questions, they can certainly get in touch with me and we'll pass them along to you.
Thank you.
But thanks for being on the show, Inga. I really appreciate it. And if you have any questions or comments, please call my office at 602-262-7445 or visit my website at phoenix.gov/District 2. And we look forward to seeing you next time on The Issues.